The gang is all here. So, hi everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm Patrick Bobilin, and I am doing a series as I'm running for state assembly right now called Where Do We Go From Here, where I talk with organizers, activists, people in politics about sort of where we go based on the sort of four simultaneous crises we're all facing, you know, whether it's the healthcare crisis with COVID, the housing crisis, the eviction crisis to come, the unemployment crisis, the crisis in civil rights and social justice, or, you know, the environmental, you know, patriarchal issues that we deal with outside of this or on top of this. So what I brought some wonderful people here today to talk about issues of sexism in politics, what it's like to be a woman in politics in public. I'm gonna just, why don't we just go around, everyone give a just a 10-second introduction, who you are, if you're running for something, you know, or your relationship, your experience with politics. If you're like, oh, I petitioned or I work or I do activism, etc. So I'm gonna mute and go ahead. Raise your hand and then we'll just, oh, I'll pass it to somebody. How about we do that? I'll pass it to somebody and then the next person passes it to somebody. Everyone's more polite than me. So to Erica.
Thanks, Patrick. Hi, all. I'm Erica Vladimer. I was a congressional candidate for New York's 12th congressional district until February when I withdrew from the race. I am also a co-founder of New York State's Sexual Harassment Working Group, and I am currently a member of Empire State Indivisible, as well as recording secretary for Freedom's Democratic Club.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Lamorte. I'm a candidate for New York City Council in Manhattan's 5th District, encompassing Roosevelt Island, the Upper East Side, and parts of East Harlem. I work in politics as well. I represent unionized construction workers in New York City and New York State government on legislative and policy items. Since I was about 19 years old, I've been active in New York politics as well, interning, volunteering, just working in a variety of roles, culminating to now where I'm running for office and serving on my local community board, active in my Democratic Club, the East River Dems, and active in my community all around.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Farias. I am a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. I'm a organizer first and foremost, but I've been involved in politics for over a decade. And I've co-founded Women of Color for Progress, a PAC aimed at training and getting women to work and run for office and win, women of color particularly. And I'm currently a city council candidate running in the Bronx, District 18, which represents Soundview, Castle Hill, Parkchester, Classen Point, Harding Park, and a couple of other neighborhoods. And I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Shana Kimball. I'm active in my community in North Brooklyn as an organizer with the McCarran Gathering, nightly vigil for the Black Lives Matter movement, and also a volunteer with the North Brooklyn Mutual Aid Group, where I'm specifically helping with census outreach initiatives right now. And I've also been a petitioner with Patrick's campaign.
So the reason I wanted to have this conversation was partially because I got some feedback from, you know, some of my neighbors that, you know, and my friends who were and volunteers who were petitioning to get me on the ballot that, you know, they had some pretty bad sexist interactions. I'm going to read one super short one and then one still short one from one young woman who's 17. She didn't have much trouble, thankfully, on the one day she was out. The only thing was some guy telling her she'd changed her mind about things when she gets older, which was more of an age thing, but I'm sure with gender mixed in, she said. Very astute for a high schooler, and unfortunately. And another young woman, you know, who's obviously had years of interactions like this, would say that, yes, I did have some not great interactions, but the good, bad news is I was wholly prepared in a way That is, they were of the same genre of interactions I have, whether gender-based or race-based, she's non-white, when not collecting for signatures. It was just heightened a bit because in my usual day-to-day, I don't sit in one spot so that they can circle back, and I don't actively talk to people on the street. So the news, the good and bad news, is that if you exist in the world, you probably do know what to expect, more or less, just perhaps to be prepared of a situation that's different than normal life. So that's, you know, what I wanted everyone to speak about. I'll say, you know, I know that Rebecca and Shana had some similar issues, and this was just sort of doing the meat and potatoes organizing of running for office to collect signatures to get on the ballot. Not even the stuff where you're on TV, where people can scrutinize what you're wearing, yada, yada. You're just out there trying to be active in your community. So I would like to hear, if it's okay in this order, let's do Rebecca and Shana, and then I would love to hear something, you know, similar experiences you've had, Amanda and Erica. Is that cool?
I would say my experience similar to that started as young as a 19-year-old intern, actually, on campaigns, where I would be sent out with the most lit because they knew as the attractive young woman, you'll get more attention than others. So that's already where the campaign was using my physical appearance and my sexuality in a way to advance the candidate. And at the time, young, naive, I didn't necessarily notice that. And then as I got older and it kept happening, and it's like, well, these people are also volunteers, but they're not getting asked to do it. You know, at a certain point, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it is a duck, you know. And then in my experiencing that I spoke with you about petitioning, it's kind of condensed in a way, because like the woman said, you are in one spot, you are continually putting yourself out there. And so one moment that really stands out to me was petitioning in the neighborhood, and a man just clearly wanted to stop and stare at me. He had no interest in signing. He dragged me down the whole process. Oh, tell me about the candidate. Tell me about this. How does he feel about that? What about this issue? While the whole time staring at my chest, unabashedly, full on. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to acknowledge that attention. I'm just going to keep it on the issue because, you know, when someone is being that blatant with their sexualization of my body and their harassment, they want you to know, and they maybe want a reaction, or they want it to hopefully lead to something. And in moments like that, while campaigning or just volunteering, like I make sure to keep it very, very professional and really hold that line, because men clearly have no problem crossing it. You know, that's business as usual to them. So that's when, sadly, I feel it falls to me as the woman to maintain that level of respect that I demand for myself and that I want to have and receive from everyone. And in the end, of course, that man didn't sign. You know, he got what he came for. He got to ogle the goods, sadly. And I was still out there doing my thing, just, you know, waiting for someone else to come along. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But like the woman said, as a woman in the world, it's not my first experience. You know, it's kind of expected, which is the saddest part to me as a woman, especially now a woman running for office, where I've had other experiences that are even more explicit, where people are asking for sexual favors, for donations and things like that. And it starts super small, where you're given the most lit to hand out because you're the cute little intern. And then it goes all the way up to someone saying, what do I get in return for this donation? So it's sadly very pervasive in politics.
Yeah, just building off of what Rebecca was saying, I had a similar experience petitioning. And this is what I have to say, you know, I'm a lot older than I think like a lot of the other women who are petitioning on the campaign. And it's something that of course I'm aware of, but I think there was something about the experience of being, you know, so public and having to initiate conversations with strangers that, you know, maybe some of my ingrained sort of like bodily or face gestural defenses against that kind of harassment. I didn't have them at my disposal, in one because I wasn't thinking about it, and also because I was wearing a mask. And I was unfortunately touched by an older gentleman who, again, was kind of like just entertaining the conversation because he wanted to talk to me and was making all these compliments about my appearance, and actually did come over and touch me on the arm, on the bare arm. And it was really surprising and, and upsetting and, concerning to me in terms of, being one of a number of volunteers, and just having this experience of of course this is happening all over the place, but just something I was just surprised that I hadn't really thought of it before, and worry about it being, limiting for women in participating in public life, from the most sort of minor and modest sort of ways of, just being a volunteer up through and including, being in office.
Yeah, I mean, one, I just want to say thank you both for being so vulnerable and talking about your experiences. I think, we as women, or women, identifying women, we experience a lot of this from when we're young all the way to our professional lives. I've had different experiences in multiple capacities throughout my organizing career. I was also the intern that was you can go out and greet people at this event, or collect contributions at the door, or go hand lit and collect with, different things like that. Along with, just running in a race as the only woman against 4 other men, even how other men use intimidation tactics to get the women on your team, the women volunteers on your team, yourself as a candidate to, get out of the building that you're in because you're both tackling the same voters. Or, I've had things said to me why don't you go do what you're supposed to be, doing, what you're good for, and go back home and go cook someone a meal. You shouldn't be running. From a volunteer lead on another candidate's team, right? So you also have structures within politics where there's a man running who's clearly training or allowing, not having conversations, or not training staff or their volunteers on how they should be interacting with other women, with people at the door, with other candidates, and then on the flip side of that, other than being aggressive and intimidating, you get the over sexualization all the time of oh yeah, that just, you fill it out, or that fits you really well, or, things like that, where it is, I think we're used to it, but it's unfortunately, can throw you off your game, or, use as a way to make you feel uncomfortable in a space where you should be comfortable, that should be safe, right? That happens on the debate floor, also on the doors, also before endorsement meetings. All of these things are used where you're in different spaces, and I don't think anyone really thinks about the comfortability level, or the situations that I think women candidates, women volunteers are put in these different scenarios. I think folks are used to women being kinder and nicer and more, can give off a more nurturing feeling, and it appeals to more people, so that's a way to pull more people in. But it's also a defense mechanism for women too, right? We also try to not get that kind of reaction or that kind of behavior, or the over sexualization. So some women, that is a defense mechanism. Some women react with a hand to the face or something back. Some women react more meek, more how do I get myself out of this? Maybe if I'm nicer, or maybe if I'm just smile, they'll walk away. But really at the core of this, men are not equipped or trained or taught, or even considerate enough to act differently around women in a lot of these scenarios.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. What's difficult is hearing the 3 of you speak. I just, there's examples from my own personal life that I can be yes, I agree, because this happened to me. And not just from my organizing and government work and running for office, but, even from working in a restaurant when I was 16 years old. And I think what that shows is how truly systemic this is, and how pervasive, as Rebecca said, this is. And Amanda, like you said, men are not trained to act differently, it's upon us women. It's incumbent upon us to be able to conduct ourselves in a way that doesn't invite such vulgar and demeaning and dehumanizing behavior. And that in and of itself right there is so wrong, because we also can never win, right? We're either so overly nice that we're inviting it, or we're too powerful, we're too strong in our stances in the way that we carry ourselves, that we're cold-hearted. And who wants to organize alongside someone like that? Who wants to elevate someone in an organizing position, either if they're too nice or if they're not nice enough? You know, so harassment really goes hand in hand a lot with discrimination, and not just on the campaign side, but also the government side. You know, I started my career after law school in the New York State Senate, where I was told that I will never move up because I was too pretty to work directly with the senators that I was working for. I was then sexually harassed by the senator that I was working for, and he shoved his tongue down my throat. And because I decided to come out, yes, a few years later, but I came out publicly, that even in of itself was held against me, because it was an unrequited kiss, according to some. People felt that I was using that as a way to try to get into politics. So she must be lying. There's no way it could have happened, because now she's running for office. How could that be? I had someone decide that that was the that was the credential that I felt was good enough for me to run for office. An actual attorney who has represented a lot of candidates and themselves right now, I believe, is going to run for office, asked me, tell me, why is an unrequited kiss a qualification for you to run for Congress? But I also want to mention that this is not just the way that men treat women or people who identify as women. Women themselves are also part of this problem. Excuse my language, but the shit I caught for running against a woman, as if someone who was older than me, you know, how dare I? Who did I think I was to challenge somebody who was considered a pioneer, as if it was so disrespectful, and that it stripped me of my feminism because I felt that I had a right to be able to stand up and try and run for my district. And it's incredibly systemic, from, you know, the grassroots organizing all the way into government.
And thank you for saying that, Erica, because I got to be honest, some of the worst experiences I've had have been other women tearing me down in the process to try to get there. And as a woman, as an intersectional feminist, I think I'm here to build up my sisters. I'm here to pull all of you with me, or send the elevator back down for someone else to come up once I've made it there. And it hurts in a different way when a woman steps to you than when a man does. Because for the man, I expect it. Like, we all know that. We're women, we're aware of what the world is like for us. But when a woman does it, that has the same obstacles and the same experiences, it's like, oh, okay, sister, I see you. And it hits you different, really, really different. So I totally relate to that.
So I have a couple, thank you all so much for sharing your experiences, and and being vulnerable, and really talking about some of the stuff that I unfortunately know some details of, in some cases of, I know, there are elected officials I know who have talked about, a friend I know who's running for office, they've talked about her weight casually, and knowing that, like, there are men in politics who think of themselves as progressive, who think of themselves as as forward looking, woke, whatever you want to call it, who still employ casual racist tropes, or sorry, well, sure, probably as well, but casually sexist tropes, and say things that they don't, that sort of roll off of their tongue. And I wonder, I have kind of a question that feels like like bad asking, but it feels like it also, what everyone's saying is like, you have to work around what exists, or what you have to work around the sort of rocks that are going to fall on you. So I wonder, when putting together campaigns, if you're putting together campaigns or putting together like mutual aid work, something that Rebecca said that is like an unfortunate truth that I know exists is like the having to demand respect, and so much work that goes into that, just to prove you have the right to be there. But do you think, those of you who are putting together, you know, mutual aid work networks or putting together a campaign, do you have maybe rules or you know, what you think people should know who join your team? Like, do you fear, have you experienced like a sort of, you know, you're the candidate or something, or you're the head of the team, but someone who's, you know, quote unquote lower than you, a man or another woman is sort of, you know, still using those sexist or sort of degrading kinds of, you know, ways of thinking? Does that make any sense to anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can start off. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think it makes sense. I think for most of us, like the first example for me, like I've been organizing East Bronx Mutual Aid for the past, oh my God, I guess at this point, 5-6 months. And we have like a community agreement form. It's kind of not like an NDA, but like just here's the culture of our mutual aid group. Here's what we're trying to foster. People actually have to sign, give a copy of their ID, like just to even participate, to like get access to anyone's data. You know, we have people that are like documented and stuff like that in the community, or undocumented. And so we first and foremost are trying to protect people just for like security, but also like, you know, we try to set the tone of running new volunteers through of like, here's how this started. Here's like the you know, our culture, like what's the mutual aid culture. Here's like literally our level of expectations of you participating in this circle. A lot of us try to like have individual calls with people of like that are new volunteers, both men and women, just to kind of all of us get a grasp of like who's joining in and who's going to participate, and we slowly integrate them through the process. No one comes in and like automatically jumps to just doing all the administrative stuff where they have access to every single person we've ever, you know, brought groceries to. So we slowly move them into that process, but it is a physical, like, here's a conversation that we're going to have about our mutual aid culture and our level of expectation serving this community. Sign this paper that you agree to it, send us a copy of your ID, it is being logged. So I think that kind of sets the precedent mostly. I'm thankful that we haven't had any instances. And also like, I've so far have not heard any complaints or any instances from doing the mutual aid work and going to folks that we're serving, thankfully. I think obviously the people that are in dire need are in dire need, and you know, the tone of the meeting of getting a bag of groceries or getting essentials is I think a bit different, you know, the feeling there. But in terms of campaign stuff, you know, my first campaign I had an all women's team, and that's because that was a safe space for me, and I created it for that reason. Of course, you get volunteers and everything like that, but it's the same. Most people came in, got a full training, understood like we were going into communities of color, we were going into impoverished communities, we were going into single parent households, right, where women are the breadwinners and the head of household. So we really, I mean, I'm big on training people and giving people what is the culture, what's our value set. But you know, you do have to like debrief with people. It's always good to debrief because you hear people's thoughts and how they process interactions. But so far for me, I think most of it is about tone setting, precedent setting, expectation setting, and at times like getting people to sign something really it ingrains in their brain that like, oh, I signed something that might have been legal, like I'm not sure, but it feels legal, it feels formal. And so far we've been really fortunate to have all of that maybe mitigate, but also like not have any instances.
I do want to say though, I think I almost feel as though you're not giving yourself enough credit, Amanda, because I've been in circumstances and situations where people sign papers, where people go through training, where they have ethics, rules, and laws that dictate how they're supposed to act. And if there are other people who aren't around to hold them accountable, then it doesn't matter what is on paper. And so to me, what it sounds like is that these people are signing these papers, but you are setting a very strong example. You are setting the tone for a culture. And I think that's what's really important too. This is not just about rules and laws and regulations. This is about changing a culture and making sure that you are setting a culture that is inclusionary and respectful, and does not foster this type of harassment and discrimination. And that really can only come from people setting the example. You know, there are rules as to how city council staff should be you know, treated. And many city council members have not been held to account. Barry Gudenchek is still there. Andy King is now on his, I don't know, 12th ethics hearing, confidential hearing, and is still there. Reverend Diaz, you know, said that he would never rat out one of his council member colleagues who sexually harasses or discriminates against a staff member. And meanwhile, there are chamber rules that they have to follow, but the culture has allowed their actions to be so pervasive because they're not being held accountable. And so, yes, the signing of a paper, I think, is really important in the beginning because it sets that floor. But if no one is held accountable after the fact, if the tone was very different, then that signature wouldn't mean anything. And so it's more a testament to you, Amanda, and the campaign that you're creating, where you are setting the tone and the culture. And that's not something that could ever be written anywhere.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think everyone here that knows me is like, Amanda takes no bullshit. So.
So Rebecca or Shana, do you have anything, you know, sort of like, you know, rules you've seen, rules that have worked, or like, you know, ways to structure to buttress against this? Like if another candidate is seeing this and they're, you know, this is one of the things that, you know, if they're non-cis male candidate and they want to jump into this, but they don't want to deal with all this horse shit, you know, what kind of community agreements, et cetera, you know, what do you think?
I don't have, so I'm still in the process of setting up my campaign team. And so that means right now, like, I have full control. But as I prepare to turn over that control, like Amanda was saying, her safe space was a team of all women. And I feel largely the same. So like my campaign consultants, they're going to be women. I mean, my closest campaign supporters and advisors right now, like my kitchen cabinet, they're women. That's just who makes me most comfortable to have a real open, honest dialogue with. And also I know they can relate in ways that a cis man just can't, quite honestly, you know, because like Amanda, like when you made the comment about like clothing, you know, yeah, like when we go to an event, it's not like, oh, let me just put on pants and a button down shirt and I'm good to go. As a woman getting ready for campaigning, it is, oh my goodness, I was at something earlier today and I put on 5 outfits, critiquing all of them. Well, how does this look? What could someone say about that? How does this show up on camera? Is this too much? Because there is so much constant blowback. So as I'm in the earlier preparatory stages, I'm purposely centering the voices of women. And like Erica said, and Amanda also said, I'm setting the tone at the top, where this is a no bullshit zone. This is a no discrimination zone. This is a no sexist zone, you know, and that starts with me and also that ends with me. So if me as the candidate, if I have to come in as the heavy and call the question, I'm always ready to do so, because my leadership matters. Everyone's leadership matters in that elected position. And if you're not going to stand up for something, then you'll fall for everything, in my opinion. And so as I lay this groundwork, I am leading with that in my mind, where I'm empowering women, myself as the woman in the moment, and just surrounding myself with more like-minded women that I know will uplift me and I know will support me and I know will be there no matter what, just because those are my experiences.
Yeah, and I would just, you know, these are all really amazing and strong perspectives that you're all bringing forward. I guess I would also say too, one of the things the conversation's reminding me of is the importance of having diverse teams, because of the ways that you know, we all might think about the different harms that we have encountered in our own lives or based on our own sort of, you know, places that we exist within society or in culture. But to be able to, you know, if you're forming a team or if you're kind of having responsibility for setting culture, how important it is to be aware of and include as many kinds of, you know, voices and perspectives as possible, to be really intentional upfront about what happens, what are the consequences, how can people come forward if they are experiencing harms, because then you're kind of not dealing downstream with, you know, things that maybe, you know, well-intentioned, but, you know, maybe like not thought out, planning has like, you know, not set the stage for. So I've seen that that's been in other contexts, not necessarily organizing, but in more professional contexts, like something that's been really powerful and useful.
Yeah, that's actually that's really on point and like really in tune to I think what a lot of people need to start doing. I just wanted to note that like, you know, it made me think of how do we actually hold men accountable. Like on my last campaign in 2017, there was a candidate that we had to tell multiple times that his volunteer was abrasive towards my team, you know, would make commentary, would, you know, follow them like door after door, interrupt them in conversations. Like really, my cat is really interested in being in this video. I'm so sorry. She's like clawing me now.
I'm having the same issue, so go ahead.
That was amazing. I'm so sorry.
Little
That
hands.
was so funny.
What a stalker. And you know, it also is about accountability and having to, you know, even as candidates, we don't have a space where we can go and say, we've had multiple conversations with you, your person isn't doing it. Like men need to be held accountable to themselves, to the teams that they're setting up, to their own, you know, staff and volunteers. Like I was in a situation where as many times as I told this candidate, I would still see the volunteer working. You know, his response was like, well, I need people to knock doors just like you need people to knock doors. And so it's like, how do we hold these men accountable as well, without looking like, because the problem is like the stigma ends up being on the woman. You know, if I went to Twitter, you know, and went off on being, you know, the angry Latina that is like being accosted and her team is being accosted and accusing someone of this, and it's really my word against theirs. It's really like no one else is to hold them accountable to actually getting rid of this person, despite the intimidation tactics or the sexual harassment or the harassment that they're doing to my team and my volunteers. So it's really like the culture thing that Erica, you know, that Eric and I were talking about, like the culture really needs to shift.
So that's a great point, and I fully agree with you. Honestly, I have a free version of Zoom, so we have 2.5 minutes left. But I do want to sort of close on that, because I think, as all of you know, as a legislator, I will probably be the opposite of Reverend Diaz. I plan to have a snitch-based legislative career, if anything. But you know, that's just me. I'm just one person, and I, you know, but I will devote myself to holding men accountable. But what could we just go through real quick and, you know, just raise your hand and then just say, like, you know, in maybe one line, like what you demand from men in holding themselves and each other accountable. If you can do that in like a 10-second bit, can we do that, you think? Go, Rebecca.
If you wouldn't say it or do it to your mom, don't do it to me. That, like, people should honestly lead with that. If you don't want your mother dealing with this comment, if you don't think your mom would like you to say how that dress looks or how your body looks or how you sound, then don't do it. Censor yourself. Because like Amanda said, when it falls to the woman, we're the bitch, we're the cunt, because we fought back, you know? So I want men to lead with that and think how they would personally feel if it was someone that close to them experiencing it, and use that as a private personal culture check, because largely government, we can.
I'm being told less than a minute. Who's got a really good one they need to say?
I just want to reiterate what Patrick said, which is the men have to hold each other accountable, right? Just as women are there to lift each other up, men have to be there to put each other in their places. It shouldn't just be on us women to hold the men accountable.
Yeah, and when we say something, shut up and take a step back and sit down. And now
Thank
my
you,
cat wants to
everyone.
leave.
Sorry, Shana, do you have one, or is that okay? Okay, great, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Also, go to patrickfornewyork.com and drop millions of dollars in. But also vote for Rebecca in 2021, Amanda in 2021, Erica sometime soon, Shana probably as well. Much love, everyone. Thank you for being part of it.
Trust
Bye.
women.
Bye.
Yes, listen to women. Bye.
Women.